What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. I apologize for the late start time. I promise you, when we go live next week, we're going to go live on time, 9:30 on the dot, for the rest of this off season. It's just so hard to come up with topics when you're live streaming every single day and to do it within a reasonable time. But these next couple of days, I'm going to take just to fully devote to coming up with topics. So we don't have any more late live streams like this one. But for everybody that took the long wait, thank you. Appreciate it. You're in for a treat because we got a very good show tonight. Talking all things college football, from the Big Ten's dominance, how long is it going to last, how rich Miami is making the rest of college football jealous, the wildcard team in the Big Ten that is going to shock college football this year, what John Mateer has to change in order for Oklahoma to win the SEC championship and to become a national title contender. Notre Dame has a recruiting strategy that nobody is paying attention to, and USC has the most disrespected quarterback in all of college football right now. If you live, eat, breathe, and die football, congratulations, you have arrived at the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you're a football junkie and you can't go a day without getting your football fix in, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you do not miss when we drop new content. For those of you guys who don't know, we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. JT Sports is available. The links are down in the description below. If you enjoy the pod, you want to support the grind, all we ask is that you take less than 10 seconds out of your busy life to give us a 5-star review. Helps us out a lot, helps us grow, gives us more exposure. Follow us on all social media platforms. You can find us Instagram, X, TikTok at JT Sports _. We post bonus content on there. We interact with you guys in the DMs from time to time. We take topic suggestions, questions that you would like answered on a future episode, and a lot more. Follow us at JT Sports _ Instagram, X, TikTok is where you can find us. Without further ado, let's dive into it. I have a lot of bold predictions for the 2026 college football season, but my biggest bold prediction for this season coming up is that the Big Ten's dominance over college football is going to come to a quick end. You see, the past 3 years, the Big Ten has had their cup of coffee after the SEC has dominated this sport for nearly 2 decades. They've allowed the Big Ten to have their moment in the spotlight, but that's about to come into a brief stop, since the Big Ten has been paying players underneath the table way before the SEC has been doing it. If we're just keeping it honest, like, the SEC wasn't the only conference whose teams was paying players underneath the table pre-NIL. Remember, the good old boys in the Big Ten, those guys, they were paying guys underneath the table. Ohio State especially. Remember Tattoo-gate? When Ohio State players were getting free tattoos in exchange for autographs, memorabilia. It's funny how the SEC were the only ones cheating, but Ohio State, they were getting their hands dirty too, but the SEC was the only one paying players underneath the table pre-NIL though, right? There were plenty of teams who are dropping backs now who were dropping backs before it was legal to. The Big Ten isn't the only conference that's been spending money, and they aren't the only conference that has money. The SEC isn't broke contrary to popular belief. Just like how the SEC wasn't the only team paying players underneath the table, you think the Big Ten was going to allow the SEC to have this advantage? No, they also knew that if the SEC was paying players before it was legal, they had to do the same thing if they wanted to have a shot at winning a national championship. So the Big Ten, despite their schools spending a lot more money than a lot of these SEC schools are, they still aren't richer than the SEC necessarily. Because the Big Ten, although they got Oregon, Indiana, USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State dropping a lot of money, teams in the SEC are spending just as much, if not more. Texas has had the most expensive roster in college football for the past 2 seasons. Texas A&M, they spend a lot of money on football. LSU, they spent nearly 40 million on this year's team, year one under Lane Kiffin. Tennessee was top 10 and the most expensive teams in 2025. Auburn, they were also among the top 10 spenders in 2025 as well. So the SEC isn't broke, and they aren't being outspent by the Big Ten. I'll say the difference between how the SEC is spending their money and the Big Ten is spending theirs is the top teams in the Big Ten do a better job at allocating the money that they spend across multiple positions. Meanwhile, the SEC, oftentimes they spend too much money on one position and their teams aren't balanced out in other areas. The problem with the SEC and how they spend money is that they just throw it at whatever player is the top available in the transfer portal or recruiting. They don't really do a lot of due diligence. Indiana, they spend a lot of money, but they make sure that they get every single penny, every single dime that they're putting into these players that they bring in. So I feel like teams in the Big Ten are a lot more thorough with how they're spending their money, with how they allocate their NIL budget compared to a lot of these SEC schools whose mentality is, we got a lot of money, there's a lot of good players, we need them, so we're just going to throw money at whoever are the best players available, and oftentimes they end up getting duds. The thing is, with the amount of money that a lot of these Big Ten and SEC teams are spending, no conference really has a significant advantage over the other, since if you're spending at least $23 million or more on your team, even if you're going up against a squad like Indiana or Ohio State that has spent $15 million more than you, it's not a big differential that keeps you from being able to have a fair shot at being able to compete with those teams, since with how good the coaching is between both conferences, as long as you at least are spending $20 million and you're in the ballpark of what these big spenders are dropping on their squads, your coaching and your quarterback play, if you have a good one, can be good enough to make up for the differential you may be at from a talent discrepancy, because you weren't able to spend as much as your opponent if you're going up against a big bag dropper like an Indiana, or Oregon, and Ohio State. You don't need to spend as much as what those guys are spending, but you just can't be too far away from what they're spending, and your coaching has to be able to make up for that difference. I think in the end, Texas and Miami are going to end the Big Ten small reign of dominance over college football. They won the last 3 national championships. Texas and Miami are going to end that because they're going to be in a national championship this year. Texas has the best team that money can buy. They got no excuses not to make it to the national championship. You got Arch Manning, who we may have been a year early on. He looked very good in the second half of 2025. If he can carry that momentum over to 2026, then Texas should at least make it to the semifinals this year. And then you hire Will Muschamp as your new defensive coordinator. So not only have you elevated your coaching staff and you've elevated your roster, but you also have elevated the expectations to the point, if Steve Sarkisian doesn't win a national championship this year, or at least make it to the national championship game, it's not far-fetched to propose the idea of Texas firing him, because when you have this much resources, this much money into a team this good, anything less than a national championship appearance, you can't make any excuses for. Steve Sarkisian is obligated to get Texas to the national championship game, and I believe that he will, since they have such a much better roster than the majority of teams they're going to be going up against. Nobody is even going to be near in the ballpark if you're in the bottom half of the SEC being able to hang around with Texas. If you're South Carolina, Vanderbilt, you're not going to be able to give Texas a close game, since there's just going to be such a big, insurmountable talent gap that you're not going to be able to overcome. You're not going to be able to have a competitive game with Texas. Teams like Alabama, Georgia, and they're going to be able to stick around and hang with Texas, since they're spending near the ballpark of what Texas is spending, and also their rosters, their quarterback play, their head coaching can make up for that talent differential that they're going to be suffering from. Miami already made it to the national championship last year, and all they did this offseason was get better. They upgraded that quarterback with Darian Mensah. If Darian Mensah can win an ACC championship at Duke in football, which is a basketball school mostly, imagine what he's going to do at Miami, throwing to the best receiver in America in Malachi Tony. He brings along his former Duke receiver with him to South Florida as well. He's going to have one of the best offensive lines in college football. He has one of the best running backs in Mark Fletcher right behind him in the backfield. And that defense, despite losing Ruben Bain, Akeem Messidor, they're not going to fall off too much since Corey Heatherman is back. You have a very experienced secondary. Texas and Miami are going to be in the national championship this year, and they're going to end the Big Ten small cup of coffee, winning 3 straight national championships. Their dominance is going to come to a quick end. The Big Ten doesn't have this big gap over the SEC as what the media thinks. Just because the Big Ten is spending money doesn't mean that the SEC doesn't have money to spend also. Alabama and Georgia don't need to have the most expensive rosters in college football in order to compete for a national championship. They are able to still be national title contenders despite not having as big as NIL budgets as what others may have, because they have good coaching, great talent evaluation, and they still are the cream of the crop when it comes to player development in college football. My bold prediction, the first one of this season, is that the Big Ten won't have a team that not only wins the national championship, but they won't even have a single team from their conference representing them in the Natty. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to Kate Brinkley. We appreciate you with the $10 donation. She says, so glad you're keeping the live streams going. Greatly appreciate you as always. I appreciate you. I appreciate you for always supporting the pod, supporting the channel. She also says the expectations are extremely high for Sarkisian this season. I bet he gets fired if they don't make it to the national championship. Hey, I don't see how he keeps his job if they don't make it to the national championship. I thought he could have gotten fired last year, but they gave him a little bit of grace since the season before last. They were just in the semifinals. But this season, anything less than at least appearance, or at least an appearance in the national championship game, I think gives them fair cause to fire him, because when you spend this much money, you pretty much are setting yourself up for national championship or bust. And Texas this year could be what Penn State was last year. Last year, Penn State was just like what Texas is. They spent a lot of money on their team. They brought back a lot of players from the previous year's team that came a game short of making it to national championship. And after they had that upset loss to UCLA, the wheels just completely fell off. And we could see the same thing happen with Texas. But we also could see Texas be as good as advertised, play up to the amount of money that they've invested into this year's team, and win it all. People act like every time Miami lands a big-time recruit out of high school or a big-time transfer out of the transfer portal, they're only getting these guys because of the money that they can pay him, which is really just college football admitting how jealous they are of how rich Miami is and how broke Miami is making the rest of college football look. Money isn't the only selling point for players wanting to come play for the U. Miami is one of the most beautiful touring destinations, vacation spots in all of America. If you go to Miami, you're not just going to play for Miami because they're offering you a big bag that you can't turn down. You're going to play for Miami because you want to enjoy the nice weather. It never gets cold like that. You can go to the beach anytime throughout the year. Speaking of the beach, you got South Beach, which is one of the most popular spring break, summer break destinations for a lot of young adults, a lot of young kids to go. You also have a very big campus with a lot of activities to do, not just on it, but around the area. There's a lot more to Miami than just we can give you a big bag. They also have the most relentless recruiter in college football in Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal has been an elite recruiter way before he got to Miami. Have you guys forgotten that he made Oregon a national recruiting powerhouse, something that they weren't before he took over as their head coach? Dan Lanning has been able to build off the foundation that Mario Cristobal built and further expand upon it. So now Oregon is recruiting a lot better under Dan Lanning than what they were under Mario Cristobal, because Mario Cristobal built the foundation and Dan Lanning finished building the house on top of it. But Dan Lanning wouldn't have the program that he currently has now if it wasn't for the groundwork that Mario Cristobal put in place for him. Mario Cristobal doesn't need money to get players to want to play for Miami, since Miami is located in the biggest recruiting hotbed in the world. South Florida is where the majority of the best players reside. If you want to have a gym or you want to find a dog that can help you win a national championship, you just go to South Florida. With Mario Cristobal being in Miami for the last few years, however, he's done a better job of locking down that South Florida talent. Years ago, you would see guys like Ruben Bain go elsewhere, go play for Alabama, go play for Georgia. But Mario Cristobal has shown that if you stay home, not only are you going to be developed, but you also going to have the opportunity to compete for championships, to compete for the SEC or the ACC championship, compete for the national title. That's why you don't need money to completely sell recruits on playing for Miami, especially if the majority of the recruits, the majority of the transfers that you're targeting already have ties to the South Florida area. Most of these recruits don't want to leave the area. They leave the area because they feel like they have a better chance being developed elsewhere than they do Miami. Not anymore with Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal doesn't have to drop a bag to get players to want to play for Miami, since there are other reasons other than money to want to come play for the University of Miami. The location, the weather, everything that there is to do around the South Florida area. If you're trying to grow your social media presence, you're trying to get more NIL money, there's a lot of networking opportunities in the area. And just because you're spending a lot of money doesn't guarantee success. Having money and spending money are two different things in college football. There are plenty of programs that have just as much money to spend on NIL as what Miami does, but they still disappoint because unlike Miami, the majority of teams who are just throwing money around just because they have to throw around, they're not allocating that money properly to building a good team. Just because Miami has a lot of money just doesn't definitively mean that they're going to be an elite team because of it. Miami is an elite team because the money that they are spending, they're spending it wisely. They're not overpaying for guys. They're paying for the guys they need, and the guys that they don't need, they're not going to overspend for because they can get guys for less that they can develop, since Mario Cristobal is one of the best developers in the sport. So Miami doesn't have to overspend for guys just for the sake of it. when you're in such a recruiting hotbed, the majority of guys that Miami's getting to commit for them out of high school that's from the area, they're coming to Miami on a discount. Guys that Miami are recruiting from their backyard probably are committing for a lot less than what they could have gotten at Ohio State, Alabama, or Georgia if they chose to leave home and go elsewhere. Since Miami is good and recruits want to stay home and they dream playing from Miami, they're willing to take less to make that happen. Players aren't just coming to Miami to collect a big check. They're coming to Miami because they know that you're going to be developed and you're going to have a chance at being drafted high, which gives you more generational money than what you're going to get coming into college football as a high school recruit. If you're a high school quarterback and you're from the South Florida area, instead of getting a $2 million payday at a school like Indiana or Michigan, you can stay home, play for Miami, take less because you know that Miami sets you up for a better chance to get developed than playing elsewhere. Two, if Miami is able to develop you, then you end up getting a bigger payday in the NFL than what you would have gotten if you would have left Miami and played elsewhere, like a Michigan, a Alabama, or Georgia. Miami has already developed Francis Mauigoa, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor. Those guys are proof that Miami is a real football factory now. They no longer are what they used to be decades ago when you committed to stay home in Miami. They couldn't develop you. You end up being a midday selection. You weren't able to be developed to your full potential. That no longer is the case anymore. When you come to Miami, unless your head just isn't in it, and you're just not putting in the work, you're going to become a better player. You're going to have a shot at playing in the NFL. And that's the biggest thing that these players look for other than being paid. They want to go to a place that can set them up to get that generational money. And playing for Miami under Mario Cristobal gives you a very good chance of being able to do that. And Miami doesn't just pay anybody. Miami's looking for dogs. Malachi Tony is a dog. Ruben Bain was a dog. Francis Mauigoa was a dog. Remember a few years ago when Texas A&M had that historically great recruiting class that they spent a lot of money on and they did nothing with it? That's a prime example of just paying players just to pay whoever has a 4-star rating or a 5-star label attached to their name. Mario Cristobal doesn't care about the stars. He doesn't care about what you're rated. He cares about what the film says and who you are as a person. Are you going to be the kind of person that's just going to be a mercenary? Or are you going to be the kind of person that's looking to make Miami a better program than what it was before you first arrived on campus? Those are the kind of dogs. Those are the kinds of characteristics that Mario Cristobal and the rest of his staff are looking for when they hit the portal and they pay these guys or they pay these youngins fresh out of high school. It's a lot more that Miami is doing that has contributed to the U being back than just, oh, we got a big bag, name your price. We're willing to spend whatever it takes to get you. No. Anybody that is saying that people are just going to Miami just because of the bag, you're just coping because you can't handle the truth that Miami being back isn't because they have to overpay guys to come play for the U. Miami being back is because Mario Cristobal is the best recruiter in college football, one of the best player developers in college football, and there's a lot more to do in Miami than there are the majority of other places that players could go play college ball at. When you go to Miami, not only are you going to get developed, you're also going to play for national championships, play for big games that matter, and also to go to a spot that just gives you a great college atmosphere, a great college experience. There's just so much to do in the South Florida area. There's just so many attractions that Miami has that the selling point isn't all, oh, Miami can just drop a big check and they can pay whoever. That's just coping. You're just jealous that your team doesn't have the money that Miami has to spend, or your team doesn't spend their money as wisely as what Miami does. That has to be the only explanation for why people continue to hate on Miami anytime they get a big-time recruit or anytime they land a big-time transfer out of the transfer portal. It's not all about the money when it comes to Miami. There's a lot more to sell Miami on than just, oh, they can give you a lot of money. The biggest wildcard team in the Big Ten this year that's going to shock everybody is Michigan. Michigan last year won 9 games with the head coach that was average at best. Now you upgrade that head coach in Kyle Whittingham, who is one of the most winningest active head coaches in the sport right now. And hiring Kyle Whittingham is a huge upgrade at head coach for Michigan. Thank you for Sharon Moore freaking and geeking. Even though you don't love what happened after that, you have to love that Sharon Moore gave Michigan a reason to fire him. Because if you didn't have a reason to fire Sharon Moore, then you wouldn't be in a position that you currently are right now, having the ability to make it to the college football playoffs, because you wouldn't have the coach that would be good enough to get you there. Now you do in Kyle Whittingham. Kyle Whittingham fits everything that Michigan wants to be as a program. Tough, physical, old school mentality. We're going to run the football down your throat. Everything that you would use to describe what Michigan football is when they're at their best is what you can use to describe Kyle Whittingham as a head coach. Kyle Whittingham is going to have success at Michigan. It's not projection. It's not speculation. It's guaranteed to happen. Why wouldn't he succeed at Michigan? This dude had one of the best resumes in the history of college football at Utah. He put Utah football on the map. Before Kyle Whittingham became the head coach at Utah, the only thing Utah is known for was the brief stretch of success that they had with Urban Meyer. Other than that, they were just a small-time program in the west part of the country that nobody really cared about unless you were from that part of the country. You were from that region. He's had multiple double-digit winning seasons at a program that isn't really known for their football success that much. So if Kyle Whittingham was doing more with less for decades at Utah, I can only imagine what he's going to do with the infinite amount of resources that he's going to be given from Michigan. And also, he's bringing in his coordinators from Utah, and Jason Beck and Jay Hill, 2 of the best coordinators at the respective areas. Jay Hill is one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, and Jason Beck has been one of the more underrated offensive coordinators in this sport for a few years now. Now, this is where things really get exciting for Michigan. Bryce Underwood's potential is what makes Michigan the biggest wildcard team coming out of the Big Ten this year. Bryce Underwood had a very impressive true freshman season. I don't care what the stats show. This brother was throwing the Amazon workers at wide receiver, at tight end. If this brother had some better pass catchers, he would have had way better stats than what he had last year. With Bryce Underwood having a better coaching staff and some actual receivers to throw the football to, you're going to see him take a big leap in year 2, and he's going to become Superman for Michigan. And what I mean when I say Bryce Underwood is going to become Superman for Michigan, he's going to have the Superman takeover ability. And what this ability allows you to do is when you get hot, you can single-handedly win your team the game. Kind of like how Cam Newton single-handedly carried Auburn to national championship in 2010. Bryce Underwood has the ability to carry Michigan the same way that Cam Newton carried Auburn to the national championship. He has the size. He has the physical traits, strong arm, phenomenal athlete. You're just looking for him to put all those tools together. And Michigan is going to be able to do that now that Bryce Underwood has a good coaching staff, somebody that has experience with players of his skill set. Hell, Kyle Whittingham last year had Devin Dampier, who kind of has a similar skill set to what Bryce Underwood has, but he's just a lot smaller and doesn't have the physical attributes that Bryce Underwood has. So if a guy like Bryce Underwood, who was like a 5-star plus recruit coming out of high school, reaches his full potential, a guy like him completely changes your program. You no longer, if Bryce Underwood reaches his potential this season, are going to be viewed as a borderline college football playoff contender. You're going to be an actual contender for the Big Ten championship and possibly vying for a first-round bye. Michigan, their roster is too good for this to just be viewed as a rebuilding year. They're 28th in returning production. They have a lot of experience coming back on defense. They should have one of the best defensive lines in college football. Their secondary is pretty good. They don't got a lot of depth at that position, but their starters are very good. On offense, you bring back Jordan Marshall, who was your leading rusher last season, and you also added more talent to a receiver room that desperately needed it, and we don't have to worry about Michigan's offensive line. There are three things that are guaranteed in this life: death, taxes, and Michigan having a good offensive line. And Kyle Whittingham, the majority of the years that he was at Utah, he has some of the best offensive lines in college football. He routinely has put offensive linemen into the NFL that have been drafted high. Hell, he has 2 offensive linemen this year. 2 of his starting offensive tackles from last year at Utah are projected to be first-round picks. Michigan is a real dark horse playoff team this year. They're not getting talked about like how the top Big Ten favorites are, like Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State, because you got folks out there that are paying too much attention to Kyle Whittingham's age and not enough attention to the body of work that he has over the 2 decades that he's been at Utah. Kyle Whittingham is one of those kinds of coaches that just has been so consistent throughout his career. You give a guy like this infinite resources, more resources than what he ever had at a place like Utah, it's pretty much the equivalent to giving him a $1,000 Walmart gift card and you tell him, hey, just go crazy, and this dude ends up buying up the entire store. That's what Kyle Whittingham being at Michigan feels like. It just feels like an all-you-can-eat buffet, because you already were a good coach, but you could have went a lot further if you had the kind of resources that you're getting now at Michigan, at Utah. And I think that it was ridiculous that Utah allowed Kyle Whittingham to walk away. Now, I get it that they already had their head coach and waiting picked out years ago, and there was some disagreement between Kyle Whittingham and the Utah administration for how they were going about getting funds for NIL. But regardless, Utah's mistake is going to be Michigan's biggest treasure, because Kyle Whittingham is a top 10 coach, and he was already a top 10 coach before he took the Michigan job. So it's not because Kyle Whittingham being at Michigan, being affiliated with a big brand, it's the reason why he's been hyped up. No, Kyle Whittingham has been slept on for years because he's been at a small school that doesn't have a lot of national relevance. At a place like Michigan, that's always in the national media, regardless good or bad, people now understand how good Kyle Whittingham is. It's kind of like how Matthew Stafford was viewed as being overrated for all the years he was in Detroit. He wasn't a winning quarterback. You couldn't win a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. And all of a sudden, he gets traded to the Rams, one of the best offensive minds in NFL history. And Sean McVay gets his hands on Matthew Stafford. And you've seen the trajectory and the perception of Matthew Stafford's career completely changed. Kyle Whittingham has always been an elite coach. He's always been one of the best coaches in college football. It's just that a lot of casuals out there haven't paid attention to how good Kyle Whittingham has been, because who's taking time out their day to watch Utah football on Saturday afternoons when there's so many other bigger games to watch, more recognizable teams to pay attention to? Unless you're truly a diehard fan of this sport, you don't know how good of a coach Kyle Whittingham is. But if you're a casual, congratulations. If you're sleeping on Kyle Whittingham, you're about to find out how good this dude truly is. Because Michigan, they don't have that tough of a schedule. As a matter of fact, Michigan's schedule is pretty workable, where they have a shot at making it to the college football playoffs in year one under Kyle Whittingham. 4 out of 6 of their toughest games this year are being played at home. You got Oklahoma, Iowa, Penn State, Indiana. All 4 of those games are at home. 2 of your last 3 games are on the road, and they're your 2 toughest games of the season. On the road, at Autzen, against Oregon. That's a tough place to win for anybody. Then you got to play Ohio State, but that's a rivalry game. We know that game is going to be a lot closer than what it looks like on paper right now. You mean to tell me, with a guy like Kyle Whittingham, who has done more with less at Utah, you give him the infinite resources that Michigan has to offer, that he can't get them to the playoffs in year 1 with a quarterback that has the upside and potential that Bryce Underwood has. Bryce Underwood is a program-changing prospect. He's the kind of guy that you bring him in, you let him sit for a year or 2, and then in his second season as a starter, that's when he blows up. Last year, Bryce Underwood's true freshman season was a lot better than what the stats show, because the situation that he had wasn't really that great for him to come in and just completely dominate right out the gate. I thought he looked pretty good for the situation that he was in. And Bryce Underwood has had some moments when he's looked, a little bit, like, well, was he really worth $13 million? And then he's had some moments like that bowl loss against Texas. I know he had a few turnovers in that game, but let's not act like Bryce Underwood wasn't out there doing this thing now. So you give Kyle Whittingham a player like this, he's going to make the most out of him. Kyle Whittingham has never had a player as good as Bryce Underwood. When Kyle Whittingham probably first stepped foot on Michigan's campus and he started touring the football facilities and he started meeting with some of the players on his team, he probably was like, damn, I haven't had guys built like this in years. I haven't had guys built like this since I was under Urban Meyer. Because the kind of players that Kyle Whittingham has right now, you don't get every day at a school like Utah. At a school like Utah, you have a ceiling. And your ceiling at Utah is occasionally you may get a 4-star recruit. You're never going to get a guy like Bryce Underwood at Utah unless you're going to allocate 30% of your NIL budget to getting him. So for Kyle Whittingham, a lot of these guys that he has at Michigan, he wished he could have had at Utah. Utah just didn't have the brand nor the NIL infrastructure to get these guys. So you give an already good coach who is doing more with less, more, if not infinite amount of resources to win, he's going to make the most out of them. I don't see how Michigan doesn't at least, at the bare minimum, win 9 games and be on the outside looking into the playoffs. I got them currently as the 10th seed in my way too early college football playoffs right now. And I dropped that 2 months ago before spring practices started. When I make my updated one, they probably still are going to be in there, if not a lot higher. Michigan could legitimately win the Big Ten this year. I don't see why they can't. Kyle Whittingham is already one of the best coaches, not just in college football, but in this conference. There's only about like 3 coaches right now that definitively you can say are better than Kyle Whittingham. That's probably Ryan Day, Kurt Cignetti, and maybe Dan Lannon. That's about it. Michigan has an adult in a room as their head coach now. If they were able to win 9 games with Sharon Moore, despite him freaking and geeking off the field, imagine what they're going to do with an adult in the room that has nearly 2 decades of winning at a program that didn't really have the kind of resources to put up the kinds of seasons that Kyle Whittingham was able to put up at Utah. Keep sleeping on Michigan. They're going to shock you. Oklahoma does not need John Mateer to play like a Heisman contender this year. They don't even need him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC this year. All Oklahoma needs from John Mateer this season is to be a good point guard, be a good game manager. All Oklahoma needs for John Mateer to do is play like Stetson Bennett. Because Oklahoma, with how good their defense alone is good enough to get them to the playoffs as long as the quarterback play doesn't hold them back. And last season, the quarterback play kind of held Oklahoma back a little bit. Now, John Mateer wasn't garbage, but he didn't live up to the expectations that he had in the preseason. And that mostly to me was because of the thumb injury that he suffered, that he had to get surgery on in the middle of the season. And once he came back, he just wasn't the same. And the problem with John Mateer last year was that he was missing too many layups. He was missing too many easy throws. There were too many times when Oklahoma would be on third down. There'll be a guy wide open 5-6 yards down the field, and John Mateer would just sell the ball 30 feet over his head. And he just made the easy throws look more complicated than what they had to be. He also wasn't that accurate throwing the deep ball down the field. Oklahoma, if John Mateer can become more efficient at hitting the layups, hitting the easy passes, operating the quick game, the short intermediate areas of the field, Oklahoma can win the SEC championship this year. Everybody was sleeping on Oklahoma last year. Everybody thought that Oklahoma, at best, was just going to be a middle-of-the-pack team, making the move from the Big 12 to the SEC because they don't have the deep pockets that Texas has. But Oklahoma last year showed that even if they don't have the amount of NIL money that teams like A&M and Texas do, with how great of a defensive mind Brent Venables is, as long as they got the offensive coordinator right and they got a serviceable quarterback, that defense is good enough to win them the majority of the games that they're playing in. Now, if you put at least an above average quarterback with that, what's the ceiling for Oklahoma then? Because if the ceiling last year for Oklahoma with John Mateer, let's just be honest, he was average last year. If the ceiling last year for Oklahoma was them making it to the first round of playoffs with the elite defense and an average, slightly below average offense with the average quarterback, imagine what the floor and the ceiling can be for Oklahoma this year if John Mateer levels up just a few notches and he plays like how Stetson Bennett played for Georgia when they won back-to-back national titles, because the supporting cast around John Mateer is a lot better than what it was last season. And the team that he has this year is good enough to raise his ceiling. He has an improved wide receiving core. They got a really good wide receiver transfer from the University of Virginia, a speedster just like Isaiah Statania. So you're going to have one of the faster wide receiver duos in all of college football. And when you have guys this fast, it's kind of hard to overthrow them, because all you really got to do is just put the ball in front of them and let those guys go run and get it. Oklahoma's offensive line is also going to be a lot better. They returned 4 out of 5 starters from last year's team, including a true freshman All-American at left tackle as well. And I love how their running back room is looking right now. Oklahoma doesn't need John Mateer to play at a Heisman level. They don't need him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. All they need him to do is take care of the football and be a good game manager. If John Mateer finishes with 20 passing touchdowns and only 6 interceptions for Oklahoma and probably 10 rushing touchdowns on the ground, that's a huge W for them. That's good enough for them to win the SEC championship, because with this kind of defense, the only way that you can disappoint is if your quarterback or your offense just lets you down. And remember, this is John Mateer's 3rd season under the same offensive coordinator, that being Ben Arbuckle. Don't forget, when John Mateer came to Oklahoma last year, it was a package deal. He came with his offensive coordinator down to Norman. So unlike most quarterbacks in college football, John Mateer has continuity in the system that he's been in for 3 years. He's a seasoned vet. He probably knows Ben Arbuckle's system inside and out. And when you have this much continuity and you know the terminology, you know how the offense is supposed to function, then it allows for you in your final season to take an even bigger leap than you would elsewhere if you would have transferred somewhere else and you have to learn a new scheme. Now, with him being fully healthy, not having any more setbacks from the thumb injury on his throwing hand, I expect to see the best out of John Mateer, because the John Mateer that we saw last year for Oklahoma was not the best of John Mateer. The John Mateer that we saw after that thumb injury was not the real John Mateer. The real John Mateer was the one that you saw before that injury, and the one that you're going to see tear it up this year for the Sooners. Because as long as John Mateer can just be a good point guard, just get the ball to where it needs to go, he's not missing easy throws, Oklahoma's offense is going to be solid. They don't need an offense that's putting up 35, 40 plus a game. They just need an offense that can just complement their defense. And if their offense is giving you 24 points per game and their offense is efficient and John Mateer is giving you efficient quarterback play with an elite defense like this one, which has a stout defensive line, one of the better defensive lines in all of college football, Oklahoma is going to be a problem once again for the SEC this year. It just all depends on how much John Mateer can become more efficient at being a good game manager. I don't care about how well John Mateer projects at the next level, because you can still be a good college quarterback and not be that great of an NFL prospect. People seem to forget that. They pay too much attention to how good is this dude going to be at the next level, and they define his potential in the NFL and use it to define what he is as a college player. And what I'm saying is, John Mateer may not be the best NFL prospect, but he can be a very good college quarterback. He's already very good running the football. If you watch John Mateer run that rock, he runs that thing like he's a running back. He has very good vision, very good burst, and he doesn't go down easily like how most quarterbacks do when they run the football. Very physical. He's going to put that shoulder down, run for extra yardage if he needs to. There's a lot to be optimistic about for Oklahoma football this season, especially if John Mateer can level up a little bit. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to my guy Simply Eli. He says, as a Canes fan, you got to love hearing that Malachi Tony is up there at 5 a.m. every day, working like he was before last year. Can't wait to see the team out there again this year. Me too, man. We got 4 more months to go, and the most dreadful part of the offseason is over. Marcus Freeman isn't just recruiting players to Notre Dame. He's recruiting players that were raised inside NFL locker rooms, essentially. When you look at what Notre Dame has done in recruiting these last few years, something that is evidently obvious is how much emphasis they have put on getting the sons of former NFL players. For example, they got Bryce Young, star pass rusher for Notre Dame. He's the son of Bryant Young, who had a very good NFL career. Remember Jerome Bettis? I'm talking about the bus. Yeah, the bus Jerome Bettis, who was a dog for the Steelers. His son, Jerome Bettis Jr., is on Notre Dame. You remember Plaxico Burress? His son is playing for Notre Dame. Elijah Burress. You want to know how old I am? I'm old enough to remember a lot of these guys when they were in the tail end of their careers, when they were pretty much one leg in, one leg out the door of the NFL. So to see a lot of these guys' sons playing for Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman, it has to mean something. What does it mean? Easy. Notre Dame is a place that a lot of former NFL players want to send their sons to, because Notre Dame, unlike most programs, is all about the academics. And when you're all about academics, you're also about discipline. You're about accountability. And there's no coach that does a better job of getting the most out of his players while holding them accountable, still showing them tough love, than Marcus Freeman. He's one of the best motivators, one of the best player coaches in all of college football. And it's evident with how many former NFL players are willing to send their sons to Notre Dame to go play for him. You remember Thomas Davis, one of the better linebackers in the NFL during his time with the Panthers? His son, Thomas Davis Jr., is playing for Notre Dame. We all know who Larry Fitzgerald is. You guys all know who Larry Fitzgerald is. His son, Devin Fitzgerald, is on Notre Dame now. You remember the Pouncey brothers? Marquise Pouncey, Mike Pouncey, Aiden Pouncey. Their second cousin is playing for Notre Dame. These former NFL players aren't sending their family members, their relatives, their bloodline to go play for Marcus Freeman for no reason. There's a reason why a lot of these former NFL players are sending their sons to go play for Marcus Freeman, because they know that Marcus Freeman unlike most coaches, is going to get the most out of them because he's going to make sure that they emphasize life after football, make sure they get the academics right, make sure they get that degree, but also make sure that they become not only just great football players, but great men as well. And Marcus Freeman wants these NFL sons, these NFL bloodlines on his team because these kids that come from NFL bloodlines, NFL families, they already know the hard work that it takes to win. So when they get on campus, the early workouts during the winter and the spring don't shock them. For some freshmen, when they first get on campus, I got a few homeboys right now that just touched down on campus, and it can be a little bit of a culture shock when you wake up for that first 5 a.m. workout. It can be a little bit different, especially with a lot of these high schools not having the same strength and conditioning programs as what a lot of these college programs have. It can be a little bit of a culture shock. And the work that you got to put in could be a little bit of a shock to a lot of these players as well. Hence why a lot of players who are talented in high school don't work out in college football because they don't have the mindset that it takes to be successful at this level. When you get a bunch of guys from NFL families that are sons of NFL players, they grew up around this. They know what it takes to be great because they saw their parents put in that work, put in that dedication to be the best at their position when they were in the league. And Marcus Freeman already has a pretty good structure of how he runs his program. So now you bring in players that are already more structured with them having that structure being under an NFL household, because these guys probably have been training since they were 6, 7 years old. They saw their dad training. They're probably like, hey, dad, let me train with you. So a lot of these guys got a very early taste of the work that it takes to be successful at this level and then some. And then Marcus Freeman, by getting a lot of NFL legacy kids who have grown up around football, you reduce the risk of recruiting bust out of high school, because it's easy to just throw a lot of money, a lot of cash at the 5 stars, the 4-star guys that everybody wants. But when you're going after guys that are from NFL heritage, you kind of already know what you're getting. You're getting somebody that has a pretty high floor. You know, at worst, they'll be a serviceable starter. At best, they could be one of the best players in the country at their respective positions because they already have the habits and the work ethic already there from a lot earlier in their life, training with their pops who were already in the NFL. And they're also less likely to get overwhelmed by the amount of pressure that comes with being a college football player. The atmosphere, the environments on the road can kind of rattle a lot of these guys. Marcus Freeman is recruiting players that already have a head start in their football development and the maturity. And Notre Dame, as we already know, they're all about academics. They have Jesus looking over the football field. And a lot of NFL dads, they like that because they want that structure. They want that discipline. They want a program that is going to allow their kids to develop. Some of these programs, their mentality is, if you can't be an impact player for us right away, we don't want you. For Marcus Freeman, he's looking for players that aren't looking for the instant gratification. He's looking for players that are okay with waiting their turn for a year or two, being developed behind the scenes before they finally get their opportunity. When you are getting a bunch of these NFL sons, these NFL Nepo babies, a lot of these guys aren't going to be one-hit quitters if they don't start in their first season. You have guys that probably are going to be willing to wait 2, maybe 3 seasons to finally get their opportunity before they even entertain the idea of entering the transfer portal. And that's how you build a good culture. And that's why Notre Dame has one of the best cultures in college football. Notre Dame, when it comes to their locker room, it really feels like a brotherhood. It really feels like a bond. When you watch Notre Dame play, you're not watching a football team. You're watching a team full of brother style, willing to lay it all on the line, no matter what it takes for the guy next to them. They're not playing for the name on the back of their jerseys. Guys on Notre Dame were playing for the names on the jersey in front of them. And that's why Marcus Freeman is going after a lot of these sons of NFL royalty. Because if you're trying to build a good program with guys that have high character, guys that aren't looking for the easy road, guys that aren't just looking for the overnight success, guys that want to hit the portal after they don't start their freshman season. Marcus Freeman is getting it right because he's going after guys that have seen their pops for years have to put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and they couldn't run. They couldn't hit the portal when things didn't go their way because they were in the NFL. You just had to deal with it, and you had to make the best of the situation. What Marcus Freeman is doing in recruiting is very impressive, and a lot of people aren't catching wind of it. A lot of people are overlooking the amount of NFL Nepo babies that Notre Dame has on the roster, and it's just a handful of these guys end up reaching their ceiling because the ceiling when you get players that come from NFL bloodlines are pretty high because these guys have been developing, they've been training for pretty much the majority of their lifetime. Since they pretty much came out the womb, they were probably training to be in the NFL. So you're getting guys that have a higher potential than most high school recruits just because of the access to certain trainers that they were with, certain resources that you only could get if you have somebody connected to the NFL, like how Deion Sanders was able to get Tom Brady to train Shedeur Sanders. That's why you go after these players that have NFL bloodlines because they already know what it takes to be great. You don't really have to lecture them on this. They already know. And that's why their ceilings, their floors are a lot higher compared to most high school recruits that they come in with a lot of entitlement. They feel like they should just get a starting job because they were a 5-star recruit. They had a lot of hype coming to high school. A lot of these NFL cats, they're more humble because they know that they still have a lot of room to grow as players based on all the work that their pops had to put in to get to the level that he was at in the NFL, to last in the NFL as long as what he did. Notre Dame's recruiting strategy is the best kept secret in college football that nobody is paying attention to. USC has the most disrespected quarterback entering the 2026 college football season. Jayden Maiava is the best quarterback in college football that literally nobody talks about. He was one of the most productive QBs in America last year. He finished with 30 touchdowns, had the second highest quarterback rating in America. His production from last season should garner him way more respect than what he's getting right now. I came across a top 10 quarterback ranking in my algorithm on X that had Sam Levitt rated above Jayden Maiava. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? There's no way that you watched Sam Levitt and Jayden Maiava and came to the conclusion, yeah, Sam Levitt is better than Jayden Maiava. If Jayden Maiava would have declared for the NFL draft this year, he easily would have been QB2 behind Fernando Mendoza. He's a bigger version of Caleb Williams. Not as fast, not as agile as what Caleb Williams is, but he has the ability to make all the spectacular wild throws off platform, outside the pocket. He has the ability to make the most complicated throws look easy with routine. And Lincoln Riley is QBU. There is no QBU in college football. It's Lincoln Riley. If you want to play in the NFL, if you want to get developed to have success at the next level, you don't go to a school because there is no school called QBU. It's just Lincoln Riley. He's the quarterback wizard. Every quarterback that he gets his hands on, he turns them into gold. The only quarterback that I've seen not work under Lincoln Riley, not have success at the next level, looks like it's going to be Miller Moss. And even then, Miller Moss was better last year or the season prior to last at USC than what he was this past season in 2025 at Louisville. Jayden Maiava isn't just some run-of-the-mill, regular smuggler, good college quarterback. No, Jayden Maiava is legit top 10 caliber quarterback. He has everything that you look for in an elite quarterback prospect in the NFL draft. He has a great arm. He has phenomenal size, 6'4", 230 pounds. Sneaky runner, too. Kind of like a Hawaiian version of Caleb Williams and Josh Allen put together. Now, the thing is, he doesn't have the athleticism that Caleb Williams has, but he still has a lot of the similar qualities to stress out the defense in a lot of the similar ways. And I think what makes Jayden Maiava a better prospect in a certain capacity than what Caleb Williams was when he was coming out of USC is that he's a lot better playing within the structure of an offense than what Caleb Williams is. And USC should have the best offensive line that they've had up to this point under Lincoln Riley. They're also going to have a really good ground game. Now, how good are the receivers going to look? Because you're replacing two studs in Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. One thing about Lincoln Riley, that brother knows quarterbacks, and that brother knows wide receivers and running backs. So don't worry about Jayden Maiava supporting cast. Who he's going to be throwing the football to? Lincoln Riley already has taken care of that. You may have some concerns about if Lincoln Riley can get that defense right, but you never should have any questions about how that offense is going to look. One thing about that brother Lincoln Riley, he just has a good eye for talent on the offensive side of the football, and it's no wonder why he has one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football, even though he shouldn't be underrated because there are only about 4 quarterbacks right now going into this season that you can legitimately say are better than Jayden Maiava. Jayden Maiava is being slept on because USC's brand is louder than his play. Folks talk more about Lincoln Riley being on a hot seat. Is Lincoln Riley ever going to be able to win big at USC? They focus more on USC's hype. They focus more on the bad about USC than they do the good, because if people actually paid attention to the good about USC, Jayden Maiava wouldn't be underrated. Jayden Maiava would be properly rated as a top 5 quarterback. Jayden Maiava, when he declares for the 2027 NFL draft, he's going to be a top 3 quarterback. Hell, to me, Jayden Maiava is a better NFL prospect than what Dante Moore is. I never understood the hype with Dante Moore. And that's why I was so shocked that Jayden Maiava decided to come back for another year. So you take an already first-round caliber quarterback and you put him back into Lincoln Riley's system, Mr. QBU himself, for one more season. You can't tell me that Jayden Maiava isn't going to be a potential Heisman finalist this year. Because with the kind of system that Jayden Maiava is in, with the coach that gets the most out of any quarterback that he touches, with the supporting cast that he's going to have, if USC finally breaks through under Lincoln Riley this year, it's going to be because Jayden Maiava played at a Heisman caliber level, and he was one of the best 3 quarterbacks in college football. Lincoln Riley has a long track record of getting the most out of all the quarterbacks that he works with, preparing them for the NFL, having them play at a Heisman caliber level. If this is truly Lincoln Riley's best team that he's ever had at USC so far, then Jayden Maiava is going to put up Heisman-worthy numbers, and he's going to make USC a legit college football playoff contender. I can't believe how many people in the national media are undervaluing how much of a beast Jayden Maiava is going to be this year. How much of a beast he was last year for USC. This dude had 30 total touchdowns. Come on now. This dude had the second highest QBR in college football last year. And you got people that have the audacity to rank Sam Levitt ahead of him. Completely egregious, man. But it's okay. Jayden Maiava is going to wake everybody up soon. This is it for this episode of JT Sports Live. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. We got a lot of viewers on tonight's episode, despite how late we went. Do you guys want me to start going live at 10:30 every single day? Because, I mean, we never get this much viewership this often when we go live at our normal time. So let me know. I'll do a little bit of a poll. And also, follow us on all social media platforms, Instagram, X, TikTok. You find us at JT Sports _. You can send us DMs. Any question that you would like answered on a future episode, send them in the DMs. We post bonus content, clips, extra stuff. You know, we just like interacting with you guys. Go ahead, follow us at JT Sports _ on all social media platforms. And don't forget, don't leave out of here without giving us a 5-star review, man. You can find us on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format, wherever you get your podcasts from. The links are down in the description below. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys on Monday with another episode.